Hey, Sanctus Church, good morning. We're so glad that you're joining us on this Vision Sunday. On behalf of Pastor Samuel and myself, we're so glad that you're deciding to be with us today. Now, you might be brand new to our church, like Sam is, or actually you might have been with us for years, like me. No matter where you're coming from, 3 times a year we take a pause.
Yeah.
And we sort of thank God for what he's done. Mm-hmm. We find out what God is doing right now and what God's about to do. Now, last September and in January, Pastor Dave, who is no longer with us, and myself, we sat just like this, and we divided last year into 3 sort of experiences. September to December, December to Easter, and then Easter to summer. So now that's sort of done. We're coming into summer. Yep. So we want to take a moment to outline where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. But before we do that, we need to take a pause, a breath, a moment, and we need to acknowledge how tough this year has been.
Yeah,
sure. I don't think we've ever lived through anything like this. And words like languishing were introduced into our vocabulary. Mm-hmm. There's so much division. We're all tired. We're all weary. And so we want to start by saying thank you. We know some of this, but not all of this. For the thousands of good works, phone calls, Zoom calls, reaching out to your neighbor, teaching your kids in lockdown about the Christian faith, loving those who've lost people. You have been spectacular as a church. And so on behalf of the board and the staff, we just want to thank you for being faithful Christians, loving Christians, even when you're exhausted and frustrated, like all of us.
For sure.
When Pastor Sam joined our team, he was sharing some stuff with the staff. And when he did this one section, I came to you and I went, you got to share this. Yeah. So why don't you just lead us through this pastoral moment to sort of refocus us as we think about the year.
Sure. No, thank you, John. Thank you for sharing just the impact of the Sanctus family. Thank you so much for your generosity in serving, even in the midst of this challenging time. And so you've been so generous with your time and talents and treasures, but yet even with all the generous expressions of love, I'm sure it hasn't been easy. Yeah. And we've faced so many challenges and difficulties. It seems like this never ends. It's a never-ending situation. Right. And even in my previous church context, we faced also similar challenges this past year. And so I guess regardless of our church or city or even country, we're all facing this. We're all going through this, and we're all wondering when it's going to end. It's going to end. So some of you actually may know, even my wife Anne is an internal medicine physician here in Lake Ridge, and so she deals with the sickest COVID patients, and so I get to hear as a byproduct of all the challenges many of the families and who've lost family members, even young people on ventilators are facing, sicknesses because of COVID, and so it's tragic just to hear the pain and anguish of people's stories. And even some of you who may be watching have been directly affected or know someone who's been affected because of COVID, and it's been weary and you feel worn out and may even feel like giving up. And so this verse just came as an encouragement for us as a staff in Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. I'd like to just read this and just unpack it a little bit. It says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at a proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." So there are 3 things I'd just like to highlight from here. First is, do not become weary in doing good. It's very easy in the season to become weary and give up. And so we feel tired and nothing's ever going to change. And so God wants us to do what is right and what is good, even when we don't feel like it. The second is, at a proper time, we will reap a harvest. The harvest is there for a time, and there's a time coming when everything, every act of love, every care, every prayer, every act of generosity is like a seed that is planted that's going to bear fruit. And I think you're going to allude to some of that later on in our talk, and just an encouragement to us. And third is, if we don't give up, there will come a harvest. And so the harvest is conditioned on us not giving up. Just imagine as a farmer, you're planting and you stop and you walk away from your harvest. You're like, you won't be there to receive the fruit of the seeds that you planted. And so it's easy to give up on God during the season, on prayer, on serving, on caring, but don't. Just keep doing good, because if we don't give up, there's a time of harvest and fruit that will come from this. And so I just want to encourage all of you, just during the season, just to continue to do what God is inspiring you to do. And so, John, I've heard so many good things and stories that have happened at Sanctus during the pandemic. Can you share with us some of the amazing stories and experiences? They're almost like, as I mentioned, seeds that have been planted in the season.
I think we've all been in the place where we want to give up. And so I don't know if any of you remember our last baptism, when I did a talk, I talked about how we moved in the middle of the pandemic, because why not? Everything else was crazy. And we inherited this massive garden that hadn't been tended for at least 2 decades. And the first run at it, I don't know if you remember me sharing, we had, in 24 hours, I think, filled 55 brown bags. And it was like so much work. And we were like, yeah, we did all this work. And then I looked at the garden and was like, all I saw was death and brown and dead. I was like, was it worth it? And I felt really discouraged that night. And then it was actually a Sunday morning. I got up because I was coming to the Ajax location to do what we're doing. And there was all this life underneath the surface. And so sometimes we as staff have access to more stories than the church. So I want to talk about all the amazing things that did happen this year that we need to thank God for. And I just want you to sit back and bask in good news.
Yeah, no, that's good.
So here's the first thing. 75 people took Alpha this year online. And many of them became followers of Jesus. And I want you to pause and think about this. People who are not going to spend eternity with us 12 months ago are now part of our family.
That's amazing.
And they all did it online. And we're just so thankful for that. And 61 couples took the marriage course in the middle of a pandemic online. We still ran 114 Connect groups with youth and young adults and adults and stayed connected. I know in my life, my Connect group was a lifeblood for me and my wife. 22 people went through the full releasing prayer process between lockdowns. We literally squeezed them in. And then beyond that, Natalie and her team mentored and coached 49 other churches to get this process going or doing well or helping someone in another church during the last 12 months.
Tremendous.
And the wild, cool thing is 71 more people signed up for Releasing Prayer in the last 12 months that we're now preparing to help. 51 people took Freedom Sessions online. And again, that's a major undertaking when someone wants to work their stuff out, and they did it virtually and work stuff out, which is amazing. And then, as we're going to see today, by the end of this time, 33 people will have been baptized this year. And again, we need to celebrate. I was saying this to the elders the other day. The average Canadian church is 89 people. And we were able, during a pandemic, still to baptize 33 people. And as we mentioned, some of them we couldn't even film publicly because they were coming from another faith and their life were being threatened.
For sure.
So this is just like this incredible momentum that's been building. Hundreds of prayer calls. Our elders have absolutely loved doing elders prayer on Zoom. They've been praying with people all around the world. And one of the best ones I want to share, we got this, I'm going to read this. Part of our Bowmanville community. It's an amazing story of a baby dedication we did online this year. So it reads like this. We just hosted a baby dedication for a Bowmanville family via Zoom. When I counted, there were 62 people's faces that I could see. It was so awesome to see the family have their friends and family join them, supporting them as they dedicated their child, committing to foster that environment where they would love God. And then they were so thankful for technology and that people from all across North America were able to be present for the baby dedication. Amazing. So though this is not ideal, this has been incredible, and it's opened up a lot of avenues. But what you might not know is we've been working hard in other ways. Samuel, why don't you talk about physical changes that no one would know because they haven't been in our buildings?
Yeah, no, thanks, John, for sharing just how our spiritual house has been transformed and growing. That's amazing. But as you know, during this pandemic, we've been able to utilize our time to fix our physical locations and to work towards that. And so that when we gather again, when you all return, we're going to see slight changes in some of our locations. Here in our Ajax site, we've actually been able to fix all the curbs outside. So
Amen.
That's a good thing.
Yes.
We've replaced or are planning to replace our entire HVAC unit. So that's going to happen, and you're going to feel and experience a little difference as well with that. And finally, we are here in Ajax. We're finishing the studio that's being built to allow for our hosting of our online site and continuing online services going forth, even after we physically gather again. That will help our online site as well. And up in Port Perry, we are this summer actually going to be rebuilding our bathrooms in the kids' wing. So that's huge, I hear.
It is.
And not only that, during this pandemic, we've been actively searching for physical permanent locations in Pickering and Bowmanville. So we want to encourage you just to keep that in prayer, that God would just provide and open the right doors for that. So that's so big. And so, John, can you speak to us? We're so involved with our community partners and invested in that. How have they been doing in this season?
So we all know that our local and global partners have lived through this just like us, but some of them in a much more difficult situation. And so we just want to stop and thank you again on behalf of the staff and the board, because your financial generosity, which Sam is going to talk about a little bit later, has been so strong this year. We didn't cut any support to any local or global partner in any way, shape, or form. And because of the Vision Fund giving, we were able, around the Christmas time, to even bless them more than our regular giving. And even a few weeks ago, our partners in India reached out because it's so bad in India.
For sure.
And we were able, because of your generosity, even to give more money. And the local churches we partner there were able to buy PPE and oxygen and all the stuff they need in Jesus' name. And by the way, while we're talking about our partners in India, in the middle of the pandemic in April, which was really brutal, I don't know if you're following what's going on in India, they baptized 10 people who had become followers of Jesus. Remember, they're working in a total Hinduistic worldview and place. 10 people publicly declared in the middle of the pandemic, Jesus is Lord, and they dedicated a new church building. So we need to thank God and remember that God is on the move. And because of your generosity, things like that are happening locally and globally. The other thing we want to talk about while we're thinking about local and global is multiculturalism. We started wrestling down in a very intentional way, moving from multiculturalism as a reality, like in person, to working it out in experience. Sam, why don't you give us an update on how we've been working intentionally in that area?
No, for sure. And as Dave and John had mentioned in January and outlined that we would intentionally grow in our understanding of multiculturalism and move our church actually from just being multicultural in attendance to be multicultural in experience, and how we relate to others and how we connect with others. And so I've so appreciated the growing value at Sanctus towards understanding and appreciating global diversity, and also within our congregation and our community that we're living in. So I'm actually reminded of a picture of, in Revelation chapter 7, verse 9, it says there are a multitude of people that no one could number, from every tribe and nation and peoples and languages were worshiping God.
Yes.
That's amazing
It's
when
the
you think
best
about it.
picture.
Yeah, and what's exciting is that we're witnessing a glimpse of heaven now, with all the nations that are worshiping here at Sanctus and what we see in our community. But in reality, we're not in heaven yet, and so we need cultural intelligence.
Yes, we do.
And how we interact with other people with different backgrounds and languages and customs and traditions. So we need to improve all of us in how we understand and relate to others. And so we promised in January that the staff and the elders will learn cultural intelligence. And so cultural intelligence is the ability to work effectively with people of different cultural backgrounds. And it goes beyond just the existing notions of sensitivity and awareness. And so our staff and board are currently in active engagement in cultural intelligence. We're actually training with a group called the Mosaic Global Network. And so we're doing assessments, we're going to have some training, and all this is just to help us towards that vision as we see in Revelation. So John, I know this assessment and the training is so important for the Sanctus staff. Can you just share how our elders have been proactive in developing and training themselves and their area?
I'm so thankful that Sam gave that summary. And by the way, if you want to go online, you can just look up cultural intelligence. It's been used in over 100 countries. All the major corporations use it, but it was actually built by Christians based on Revelation 7:9. And why we love it so much is because it starts with each one of us, wherever we're starting from, and teaches us better to interact with someone else's culture. So no one's over someone else. It's actually a level playing field, and we're going to work hard to also see how we can get a resource even to volunteers in the future to train them at every location. Because from Port Perry to downtown Toronto and all the way to Oakville, it's a different ballgame, right? So we want to do this. Now, as Sam said, the elders have been working hard too. Because we changed our membership model, we were allowed to actually have a lot more people access eldership. And so as we started doing that, we moved from a reactive position to a proactive position. And one of the things we said related specifically to multiculturalism is, wow, we need to be proactive to see how many people could be elders from all sorts of backgrounds. And so we put the word out. And since January, the board has done this incredible thing where they've started an intentional mentorship program. It doesn't mean they will become elders, but people who might become elders. And this is like a year process they're in. They started in January. I believe there's 9 individuals right now from 5 different ethnic backgrounds, all in interaction. And we're just so excited that the elders took that initiative. And it's going really, really well.
So good to hear.
And I mentioned it a few minutes ago. Let me do it again. Let's just talk about money, because I'm sure a lot of people are going, how's the church? Because the world is pretty wild.
Yeah, no, thank you, John. It's so great to hear how the elders are serving and impacting all of us. And so we're so grateful for your generosity in this season. I know during the pandemic, it's been hard. It's been a difficult financial season for many of you. But yet you've expressed your heart's gratitude to God by giving for God's mission and purpose here at Sanctus. And so Dave and the senior leadership, even prior to me coming, had to make some very difficult decisions. Brutal. Very hard, hard on people, hard on the staff at the beginning of this pandemic that allowed us to actually stay in the black throughout the year. So that's a great blessing in itself.
Absolutely.
We missed budget by 2%. It's not bad.
During a hold on, let me say that so everyone can catch it. So only 2%.
Only 2%.
Yeah, incredible.
And that's because of your generosity. Even during this pandemic, we were still able to reach our ministry goals. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. That is an expression of your love to God, that people's lives have still been changed, as John just mentioned, through your generosity and your giving. We've also been working on our new budget for fiscal 2022. And it has faith and optimism for a post-pandemic life, and we're hoping to continue to reach our goals and our visions. It's conservative in understanding the reality of the pandemic, and we're uncertain how life will be, in the coming months, in the coming years. So we're going to present this budget to you all in the upcoming ministry directional meeting on Thursday, June 17th. Hope you can join us as well for that. But we'll be presenting it, and so you can see that. So thank you for your generosity as we passionately pursue God's given mandate here at Sanctus. And so, John, just exciting things for us in the future.
Yeah, so that's the key word, the future. Now, when we talk about the future these days, it's more like months than it is years. But we want to stop and say, that's where we've been, this is where we are, and we need to talk about where we're going. We are unashamedly still all in on our God-given mission and our God-given vision. And as we are living, sort of feels like the tail end of this COVID reality and starting to walk out of it, we need to ask the question, what are we going to do next? So the very first thing we want to do is we want to relay back to you the survey results we asked you as a congregation as we prepared for the sort of end of COVID and beginning of new life. And your survey results were really interesting. Sam, why don't you actually walk through those with us?
Yeah, no, they've been very helpful for us because it's given us some context and knowledge on what we should do next. And so I'd like to just mention the results of it. And the question was first asked, when will you come back? Right. So here's some percentages. So 46.6% of you said that you're waiting for the vaccine or the vaccination. And that's good news because I hear that the process is speeding up. So that's good. 30.8% of you said that when we start having live worship, that hopefully you'll be back in worshiping. 26.5% of you said that when we have kids ministry, Sanctus Kids running. 24.9% said when there's live preaching, when you're up there sharing. And 20.6% when we actually can have social interaction, when we're not all masked and when we can actually talk and see and connect with each other. And so the next question we actually asked was, when things are fully open up, 100%, would you come back in person or would you continue online? So that's actually a very interesting question. Here are the results. 46.2% of you said you'll be back fully in person.
All in.
Yes, all in, worshiping. 43.5% said that you would utilize our online service when you can't make it in person. Maybe you're up at the cottage or you're working and you just have to catch it on demand or live stream at that time. But 10% of you said that you would be actually part of our online site all or most of the time. So maybe part of our online community, our church there. And so who knew that this pandemic would actually give us a gift? And that was Site 5.
Site 5, that's right.
Our online church. And so Site 5 is where we all go to church right now. That's our current reality. We're all actually part of this online site.
As I said in January, the biggest site launch in our history. Yeah, that's right.
And also it's for when people can't go to church. They can access that. Or when people get introduced to Sanctus, they've never been to Sanctus, but they get to capture the glimpse of what Sanctus is like, and they maybe continue to call it their site, their home. And this also is what you're going to share with us shortly, is it feeds us into our house sites. And so our online site is a portal to the house sites. And so, John, can you share what's the vision and purpose for our house sites?
So we introduced this in January, and have spent a lot of time between January and now working it out. It wasn't just something we threw out and then walked away from. As so many churches are actually preparing their own funerals, really. We're going to come out of COVID strong. We're going to be reopening. We'll talk about this in a minute. Our current sites, we're going to continue to strengthen Site 5. But we added house sites to our multi-site tool belt. And we're going to envision house sites functioning in 3 ways. So just let me say this. I'm going to read it so I say it absolutely correct. First of all, number 1, pandemic reentry. House sites will provide a solution for people who feel they might need longer than others to feel comfortable returning to a large gathering after the pandemic. The second is a strategy to launch future sites. We're going to use house sites to build core groups of people and leaders in the geographical areas that God has asked us to go to. And then we can launch more permanent sites later. The third are what we'll call permanent house sites. They would most likely exist in geographical regions that will not have a local site that we know about right now. Now, we made this clarification in January. Let me do it again. House sites are different from in-home connect groups or other connect small expressions. House sites are celebrate big discipleship expressions. They happen at a regular time every week, and you gather together in a home to watch basically what we're seeing on Site 5. You engage with the sermon, you worship together, you hang out after together. There can be overlap between, of course, a house site and connect groups, but they are different and they have different emphasis. Now, what we're going to do today that was different than January is that if you are interested in launching a house site or joining a house site, you can sign up at housesites@sanctuschurch.com. And so if you're, for example, in Oakville or in Stouffville or in Port Hope, and you're like, we know you're coming, I'm open to that. Or you might say, I'm in Pickering or Ajax or Whitby, and I'd like to open my home in time when the government, we're going to work out the governmental things. In the transition, I'm open. So we're going to ask you to sign up today. housesites@sanctuschurch.com. When you go and email, you'll get a survey and will help us understand. But this is so important because, as we were saying, this is going to allow us to get ourselves established in all 10 locations sooner than we thought. And so we're asking you, please, to move forward with that as we work things out. Now, the next question a lot of people are thinking about is, when are we opening Ajax, Port Perry, Bowmanville, and Pickering?
I think that's $1 million question.
That's $1 million question. Yes.
As soon as the government gives us permission, our hope is to immediately open Ajax and Port Perry at any percentage. So I think the next stage says about 15%. So when the government gives the go-ahead, we're going to have live worship and live preaching at our Ajax site and Port Perry. And we're also planning and budgeting for, our goal is for our 4 physical sites to be up and gathering in person in September. So that's our goal. We're planning, preparing, and budgeting for that, and still continue to grow our online site. So that's still going to continue as we've just talked about. So I want to encourage you that when you're ready to return, to come prepared and plan to worship together, to serve together. You see, we can't fulfill this God-given mission without you. We're in this together.
We can't launch a children's ministry if there aren't volunteers. The other thing to say too is you're gonna have to have lots of grace, because we're trying to work out how many worship teams can we have, when can we have certain things. So there's going to be some ups and downs as we reestablish each site, and we're just asking for your grace. It's not going to be exactly as we want it day one.
And that's what we need everyone to work together and serve and to give time and your talents to serve in different various ministries, because it may be a progression in how it's being rolled out. But so that's the plan. So as soon as the government says something in the summer, Ajax and Port Perry, and then the fall in September, we're hoping that all our 4 physical sites, and keep praying for those locations as well in Bowmanville and Pickering as well. But that's our hope. And so John, why do we do all this? Why do we prepare an online service? Why do we need to volunteer and serve in worship or family ministries or care, guest services, or releasing prayer? And why?
People. This is what we got to remember. People. And as you're about to see, we're going to witness 6 more baptisms today. Actually, there were 7. We filmed 6 of them. And we want you to stand up in your living rooms or wherever you might be and cheer and see God's work. And we want to invite you to do that. But before we go to that moment, let me just read this really odd verse out of Genesis 26. And this should be, I think, our focus for the summer. Isaac, Abraham's son, has an encounter with God. It says in Genesis 26:1, now there was a famine in the land, beside the previous famine in Abraham's time. And then God says to Isaac in verse 3, stay in the land for a while, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I'm going to give you all the land to confirm the oath I swore to your father Abraham. I will make you your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. I will give them all these lands, and through your offspring all the nations on earth will be blessed, which of course we know is Jesus.
Yeah.
But it's verse 12, which is the odd, weird, beautiful thing. Verse 12 says, Isaac planted crops in the land, and that same year he reaped 100-fold because the Lord blessed him. Wow. Isaac planted a vineyard in a famine because God told him to. And God did this unbelievable thing. Now, we're not up here saying, oh, listen, we've done so well, God, it's not going to be 100-fold. No. Here's what we're saying. God is going to take all the work we have done and we are going to do over the summer and in the last year. We've been planting in a desert-like condition. For sure. God's going to put his hand on it, and there's going to be more growth, not less. And so you need to pray into that. You need to believe that, not because it's sort of pie in the sky, because we have the promises of God. And one of the best evidences of that is what we're going to watch next. So we invite you now to see these baptisms, to celebrate what God has done this year, and we look forward to seeing you virtually or in person sooner than later.
Yes,
God bless you.
Thank you. God bless.